It's International Women's Day, and to celebrate, we decided to pair two women at the top of their field in the video game and entertainment space to have a conversation about their careers, what they're working on, advice for newcomers, and a lot more. Please enjoy producer Deborah Snyder, best known for bringing the DCEU to life, who has most recently been working on Zack Snyder's Justice League and Army of the Dead, in conversation with Kiki Wolfkill, former executive producer at 343 Industries and current studio head of Halo Transmedia and Entertainment, currently shooting the upcoming Halo TV series.
First, let me say, what a pleasure it is to meet you, and what a gift on International Women's Day that we get to have this conversation together from different parts of the world at the moment. I feel super lucky, so thank you for joining me on this.
So do I.
Yeah. So I have been in video games for over 20 years. And I started off wanting to make documentary films. I was a Chinese history major, an art minor, no career path to speak of. But I wanted to make documentary films. And so I learned how to shoot and to edit. And I ended up just sort of fibbing my way into an internship, digitizing videos, which at the time was a very black art, to digitize tiny videos. But I was also a huge gamer, without really understanding that you could have a career making video games or thinking video games was anything but just code. And so I sort of parlayed my experience in digital video editing into effects and compositing work and started doing work on games. And once I got into games and sort of met that junction of creativity and technology and innovation, I didn't look back. And that just sort of grown into sort of transmedia and different forms of visual storytelling. It's been a really amazing journey.
And right now you're filming too, aren't you?
Yes. Well, I'm in Budapest right now. We are still working on season 1. It's been a very long journey. But yeah, we're making progress. It feels good. We got a bunch of shooting done this winter in this post, sort of COVID protocol world, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You've probably gone through a bit more of it than even I have. And I'd love to actually, your work is so well known. I will say 300 and Watchmen are two of my favorite pieces of storytelling. But I feel like you should share with the audience the depth and breadth of your experience.
Well, let's see. I started out in advertising. I went to, it's funny how things change and evolve of what you think you're going to do and then what you end up doing. I went to Ithaca College, and I thought they had a really good journalism program. So I thought I was going to be a reporter. And when I went there, I realized that I didn't really like being in front of the camera as much as I loved being behind the camera and planning and creating. So I switched to production. And, I came from New Jersey, so being in Hollywood and making movies seemed like the furthest thing.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
But, to me, making a feature film, I didn't know anyone who did that. It seemed like not something that was very tangible. But New York City was very close, about an hour away. Madison Avenue and all the ad agencies were there, and telling these 30-second stories in terms of commercials was something that I felt like it was accessible and I could see myself doing it. And when I was in college, I did an internship. My friend's dad was a creative director at DDB Needham. So that was my first exposure. And I got to follow different producers and see what it was like to actually produce these TV commercials. And, for me, that is such the backbone of my experience because, you really learn how to make these small movies and tell stories. And it really prepared me for my career as a film producer. It was super transferable because it's all the same steps that you do in making a movie, but just on this shorter, smaller scale. So I actually didn't, and my intention was never to be a film producer, but I had met Zack on a soft and dry deodorant commercial that I was producing, and I hired him.
So romantic.
I met him on a Reebok commercial a few years back, but we kind of met again, and we were both single, and one thing led to another, and I moved out to California once we got engaged. Of course, I didn't want to give up my rent control department in New York. And when I moved out here, I was like freelancing as a commercial producer. And it wasn't until 300 came along and he was trying to get it made. And the producers that were on, they were trying and pitching it, but no one understood what it was. And I think in advertising, you learn how to sell. And I think that, I'm sure you know this, but it's like, trying to explain what your idea is and visualize your idea is such a big part of our jobs.
You threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness.
Madness. This is Sparta!
And we did this elaborate pitch, and we actually shot, they gave us some money to do a test of what it would look like, because they kept saying, is it animated? And we're like, no, but it's going to look like this graphic novel. And no one knew what that meant. And they go, well, we have Brad Pitt doing Troy. Like, who do you have? And we're like, well, we have this comic. We have this like Frank Miller graphic novel. And, so we were able to sell it to them by doing a whole presentation like I learned to do when I was in advertising. And I got to be an executive producer on that movie. Kind of one thing led to the other. Like, we had a really great experience working with Warner Brothers, and they had asked if we wanted to come on the lot and produce for them, which then led us to Watchmen, and then that, I think, kind of led us to the DC films, among other things. But that was kind of my journey.
Wow, it's so funny because I feel like advertising gets such a bum rap sometimes, just in terms of the format. And it's such an amazing, like, short form storytelling. And I think when you build muscle in that short form and how to convey like an emotion and an idea really quickly, that absolutely translates into the longer form pieces. And it's interesting because I feel so fortunate. I've done some smaller sort of linear pieces associated with Halo in the past, definitely not of this scale in the non-game realm. And so it's been such an interesting journey for me. Learning at this stage in your career is an amazing thing. And I love that opportunity. But sort of as I do the analysis of, what skills do I bring, what transfers over, what doesn't, it's been so interesting because a lot of it isn't necessarily what I thought it would be. And then there's skills that I want to bring over, and systems are so different that it can be challenging. And that has to do a lot around, I think, more of soft skills than it is sort of process specific.
And every project is different too, right?
Yeah.
It requires different skills. I mean, you have a lot of technical skills on top of it, like probably more so, I'm not working with the software or the cameras or anything, but I think the experience, for me in advertising that was most transferable was like working with different personalities, and managing different people really prepared me for all the different personalities and people on each team. And it's constantly changing as you do it. So can you tell us, because Halo is just massive, and can you tell us what it was like to be involved and how it all came about? And it's such an amazing game, and it's like just ginormous.
Well, this is our 20th anniversary year. So I know it's crazy. It's crazy to think about. There aren't a lot of game franchises that are frankly that old, that legacied. And so I came on and joined 343, which was the studio formed to take Halo on from Bungie back in 2008. I'd done some work with Bungie before that when I was art director for Xbox. You know, Halo sort of started with a small, amazing team in Chicago called Bungie Studios that Microsoft acquired because they needed a tentpole property for the new Xbox. And, you know, many would say, myself included, that the success of the original Xbox and really where we are today is due to the success of Halo, which pioneered sort of first-person shooting.
Yeah.
Not in terms of like the first ever to do it on console, but the first to really make it feel natural and combine that with an empowering story and like immersive world, and all those things sort of came together. And when Halo Combat Evolved, the first was released, there was also a book released on the same day called Halo: The Fall of Reach. So really the transmedia aspect of Halo has been there since the beginning. And it was just those two things. There was the game and the book, which was the origin story of Master Chief and the Spartans. And I remember as a player staying up all night and playing Halo Combat Evolved. And I just wanted more. Like I finished and I just wanted more. And there was the book. And I went into the book and I loved the depth it gave me. And that like just hooked me into the world. So I like, it's such an honor to be able to sort of carry the legacy of Halo forward and try and figure out what path it takes, right? Try and figure out what kind of experiences make sense for the story, and how do we engage different people with different types of experiences. It's sort of an incredible sandbox to play with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've been very deep in one IP for I guess over 10 years now, amazingly enough. You get to play in a lot of IPs.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, we have just spent 12 years with the DC characters. And it's really interesting because having spent 12 years working on these films with these characters that people grew up with and have preconceived notions about who they are and what they should do, and then just recently shooting something that's an original IP, Army of the Dead, that is a genre that people are aware of, but take a story. It's really just, it's interesting how those things relate to each other, but also are so different. And it's freeing in one way to be able to do something when there's no expectations, but it's also, I think, exciting to take these characters that people are familiar about, but tell their stories, you know, and maybe tell them in a different way, still being true to the canon. And that's the fine line, you know, because there's an expectation on them. But you also want to, you know, you want them to go somewhere. You want to tell their stories, to elevate them. And you know, for us, it was kind of starting. It was a little, you know, once you do Watchmen, which is deconstructive, like it's hard to go back, you know? So for us, we couldn't start with having them be these full-formed heroes. We wanted to like make them relevant and make them actually have a journey so they can go somewhere. So, you know, finally, I think in Zack's Justice League, we're going to get to see kind of the end of that journey, which is, it's been really fun. And you know, also crazy that we're actually, you know, being able to do that.
I need warriors. I'm building an alliance to defend ourselves.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so excited. Yeah, you know, it's such an interesting needle to thread with beloved characters, right? And how do you give them, how do you give a different perspective on them? How do you make their journey meaningful in a different way while respecting their past journey, right? And the things that people love about their journeys they've been on already. It's kind of a constant challenge, sometimes a struggle, right? Because you have to be able to try some different things. But yeah, it's something we certainly grapple with. And for us, part of part of the value of transmedia is it does let us use different mediums to be able to explore maybe a different trajectory or maybe a different view into a character. There's different burdens that will go onto the television show than the game carries, right? So if we can sort of navigate where we have a little bit of freedom to try and explore some different ideas or to express a character differently, we try and take those. But as you know, it's amazing to have these dedicated fan bases and communities. But it's also hard because there's so many diverse perspectives in there. And at some point you can't satisfy all the voices and you need to have your own voice.
No,
right?
and that's the thing. And I think that's what we're seeing now is like, I think there is a rejection of like, at least in the film industry, of films being made in a boardroom. I think people want to see a perspective. And I think they're calling bullshit when it's not their perspective, that, you know, they're being sold something differently than what, you know, was promised to them.
Yeah.
And I think that listen, if everything is the same, it just becomes very boring. And the same thing with the characters. But, you know, I just think the passion that people have for these, and the same with the characters that in Halo, like when you're playing them, you also, I think, identify with them in a much different way. And I think it makes it extremely personal for the fans.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Your level of investment can feel deeper, but also that means 3 different people playing will have put 3 different versions into that character. And so they all think of that character as 3 different things. And so that's what's so interesting. And so, you know, the hope is you can play the game and you can have this sense of who this character is, and you can love that. And then you can stop and put that aside and enjoy this other experience and get taken on a different journey, right? And see that character in a different way without feeling like it's impeding on the character, you know, you already have in your heart around the game. And that's something
by the way,
interesting.
I totally understand that, you know, and I think that's what we've tried to do too, is to make these characters relatable, because I think in some, like in the comics, I think they have been more successful of making them more relatable or understanding them or going into depth. But I think sometimes in the movies, there was a little bit of a lack of that. So, and I always felt like, listen, I don't know what it's like to have superpowers. I'm never going to know that as an audience member. But if I am trying to find my place in this world, or if I'm, you know, I'm lost, or if I'm disenfranchised and and I'm on this hero's journey, like those are things that I can latch on to.
But she must never know the truth about what she is.
And I think that's, you know, to have that deep history, but showing it, presented it in a different way. And you're right, in the different mediums, I think, like we've seen, I haven't done any television in the DCU, but I think that they are able to tell different stories than we're able to tell. And then the animation, you know, there's a whole arm of animation, and they're making stories. And then we have the comics continuing. I just think for people who love, you know, these characters, they're going to get to see them in different ways, like you were saying.
I'm pretty sure you have some superpowers, Debbie, as exemplified by your background, your achievements. Yeah, you know, and games is so interesting, and I don't want to genericize because there's so many incredible storytelling mechanisms and mechanics in games. But in a first-person shooter, there's only so much of a character journey because of that, wanting to maintain some of that character for people to pour into him or her. So TV gives us a long-form, you know, ability to really just focus on character and story in a way that's just harder to relay in a first-person game.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we are celebrating National Women's Day, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a woman in your industry, a leading woman in your industry?
Yeah. Well, the good news is there's a lot more of us than there used to be. Early in my career, there were very few. You know, I think there's always been good intent in bringing more women into the industry. I think in the last 3 years, we're seeing intent backed up by, I'll call it executive action, meaning actual changes to infrastructure and culture that will facilitate more than lip service. And I don't say lip service because there weren't good intentions, but I think people thought it would be easier than it was to get more diverse workforces. And so, you know, I think I came up when there weren't a lot of women in games. I used to race cars at the same time, and there were even fewer women in that field. And so I kind of came up with just a really thick skin for it, which wasn't a good thing, right? Because if you have a thick skin and you're just sort of focused on powering through, you're not actually facilitating the change that needs to happen, which is where I think we are now. So I would say the industry is being really deliberate about not only bringing more women and diversity in, but actually more importantly, I think than that, building a culture where diverse voices will stay, because that's been a real struggle, right? It's one thing to figure out how to hire more. It's another to make it an environment where they want to stay and thrive. And that's something that's super important for me.
Yeah. And, you know, it's oftentimes for me, you know, we hear actors talking about it in terms of content or what actors are getting hired, or what directors are being hired. But most of the time I'm on a set for 100+ days and I look around and there's not that many women. So it's been my goal to try and get more women behind the camera in positions that they might not even know that are available to them. You know, I love it. I also, it's funny because we kind of have similar histories. You know, in advertising, I worked on beer commercials and Haviland motor oil. So I interviewed like Mario Andretti and like, you know, it was such a boys club and I was really used to running with the boys. And, you know,
you get really good at it, right?
You get good at it and getting your voice heard. But I think when I came to the filming and I looked around and I was like, there's not that many. Yes, there are a lot of female producers, but there's not a lot of female DPs. There's not a lot of female stunt coordinators. And there's not, you know, so what can we do? And I think when kids are in film school, it's too late. So I've been trying on every production to target kids at a high school level. And we have done programs. We did it for Wonder Woman. We did it on Justice League. And they're all different depending on where we are. I've had young women on Justice League, I had 2 young women shadow me for 5 weeks each. And what they would do is they'd pick where they wanted to spend their time in different departments. And they'd spend like a week with the camera department. They'd spend a couple days in stunts. And then they'd spend the beginning and end with me to just say, like, look at all these opportunities. There's so many opportunities that I never knew existed. And maybe you didn't know existed. And if you can't see it, then you can't be it, as Gina Davis would say with her foundation. She's doing such great work on gender parity. But I just think the only way we can change it is to make these conscious decisions. Like I always make conscious decisions to hire women. It was a conscious decision to hire a female director for Wonder Woman. But also, you know, we tend to have a lot of women in heads of departments. And I think it's just that, you know, to us, it's important. And I don't want to work on a set that's just women. I just want to work on a set where there's parity. You know, I think it's much more interesting. And I think it's easy for people to talk about the actors and the scripts, but it's a lot harder because people don't know who's actually making these movies. And if we can start by educating young women and also, you know, boys, because I do programs with both where I'll bring just women to set and then I'll bring, you know, a mixture of girls and boys, usually at high school or junior high.
That's amazing. I love that so much. And there's a couple things in there. One, sort of your point about people behind the camera. So many decisions get made, and even tiny decisions can have such a big impact if it's coming from a different perspective, right? And so if you think about all those decisions adding up together, right, that's really impactful. I think the other thing, because I do a lot of work trying to get more women and girls into STEM. And, you know, I think there's an idea that STEM in video games is just coding. I had the same thought, right? They don't think of it as a creative industry, and they don't think about all the different kinds of roles, right? And that's where introducing them, to your point, young, to the range of roles is super important. But I think the other piece that we try to focus on is you have to be willing to take a chance, right? And you have to be willing to bring people in who may not have had all the same opportunities as others have, and may not on paper be as qualified, but you have to be able to have a certain number of spots that are really for potential, right? And you're willing to bank on and invest in someone knowing it's going to pay off.
Yeah,
and if it
absolutely.
doesn't, right, well, it's still worth it. But I'm guessing it's the same.
I always said, if you're not making the like right now, we have to make the conscious decisions, and then hopefully someday they won't be conscious anymore. It'll just be the norm.
Right.
But we have to start somewhere, you know.
Yep.
So I mean, it's been really rewarding, and I think mentoring, you know, has been something that I don't feel like I had a mentor. I had lots of people that gave me advice along the way, but I didn't have someone that said, here, let me take you under your wing. And a lot of times it was scary navigating, you know, as a young producer and not knowing. And you always, you know, as a producer, you're in this leadership role. By the way, most people don't even know what producers do, but
that's a good topic.
So like trying to figure it out on your own. And I remember I had an opportunity, and I, you know, was in a little over my head, but I was like, gonna prove myself. And I wished I had that person there that I could ask those questions that to me seemed like stupid questions, but no question is really stupid. So I think taking someone under your wing, like, is the best thing. And giving advice, and it doesn't take that much effort, but it means so much. And I think, you know, hopefully then that person will pay it back down the road.
That's right. And I think part of it is, you know, inclusivity is so much about not having people feel alone. And you remember those moments when you knew there was something that was sort of above your abilities, but you were going for it. And it was lonely, right? Like, it was scary and exciting and challenging. And it was also really lonely because you're kind of charging ahead on your own. And I think, to your point, having a mentor or peers, or, you know, as we talk about getting more diversity in the industry, people who, you know, who look like you or have your background, you know, having someone you can share these experiences with is part of having people stay, or even be drawn to your project in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. There's more work. Like, I feel like finally we're in a place where at least all the different types of work across all these facets people have acknowledged needs to happen. It's not just this one thing. It's not just recruiting. It's not just X, Y, or Z. I think people are finally understanding it's sort of these suite of things that need to happen to really drive the culture change. So that's good. But so much work to do.
I also think there's like how you act and how people treat people. Like, I think there's an accountability now that there hasn't always been. And I think that's also refreshing and will allow more inclusivity, you know? So I think things are changing, you know, slowly, you know, but they are going in the right direction. Rewarding thing that you like, what moment do you recall as being something that's the most memorable or rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them were probably tied to I was the executive producer on Halo 4, which was the first game we as 343 had built, and I was responsible for hiring the team and also delivering on the game. And so I think it was shipping that game. I think there's twofold. One was watching the team achieve such an extraordinary thing was like, that was the thing that I hope someday to be able to replicate again, because just, you know, being able to be there to help, you know, facilitate the team doing their best work was amazing. And then just the fact that we were able to do it, like it was a very high sort of risk reward scenario, us taking on that game. And never have I seen a team of such like passion and single-minded focus. And we all knew our chances of success were like super small, but we were all in that mindset of, if anyone's going to do it, we're going to fucking do it. And if we don't, we will go up in a giant ball of fire, but at least we friggin' tried, right? And
You were
we
all
did
in.
it. Yeah. You kind of, you know, like for me, it's not worth doing if there isn't, you know, that level of risk, because, you know, our time is short, and, you know, doing the things, the big things, is super exciting. So I think that was it for me, was that moment. And I feel like there's more of those in the future. I don't feel like that was it, but yeah, that was a super special time.
You know, bringing Wonder Woman to the screen for the first time, and Zack and I cast her in BVS, and we designed the costume there. So we did a worldwide search, and, you know, it was like a long process to actually find Wonder Woman, and then to design the costume. As you can imagine, like, you know, you want to pay homage to what was done in the past, but you want it to be modern. And the, you know, costumes, there's an expectation of what they are like, and people have a lot to say about costumes. But the day
and it's costume.
And it's a costume, yeah. The day she came to set, her first day of filming, and it was the first time we had the final costume and her final hair and makeup, and she came to set, and I was like, wow, we're bringing her to the screen, this feminist icon, like, for the first time ever, you know, like, so it was this amazing moment. But it wasn't that moment. It was that there was someone brought their niece, and she came and she had this letter to Wonder Woman. And what I realized was that these heroes that we had, you know, to so many people, not just little girls and boys that were going to get to see this amazing, powerful female character that was dimensional, and, you know, she was strong and beautiful, you know, that it was touching them in a different way. This wasn't Gal, the actor. This was Wonder Woman to this little girl. And in this journey with these characters, along the way, we've received a lot of letters or people stopping. I mean, they recognize Zack and they stop him on the street, or the mail about how the stories that we told have changed their lives and made, you know, like, they felt like it resonated with them. And I said, you know what, no matter what happens, like, to be able to have an impact on someone's life that way is super just touching and important. And, you know, just like seeing this character, this strong female character on the screen that my daughter and my son can see and won't know that it took years of struggle to get her to the big screen. You know, to me, that means so much.
Yeah, I'll just say her Wonder Woman, her character is a revelation. Like, it just, like, I can tell you, and I grew up loving Wonder Woman, and like, I adored seeing her on screen. And, you know, when I think about Wonder Woman, when I think about Black Panther, when I think about these opportunities to really have people feel like they're represented, and that they have a place in the hero realm, is super important and so cool. And yeah, and that's why we do this, right? We do this.
No, but we do this because it makes impact. It's not just, I always say, whether you dislike or don't like, if you go away and you're thinking about it and want to talk about it, like, that's so rewarding. And if it does something to change your life, that's even like, wow, I can't believe it. You know, it's really, it's amazing. I feel lucky that we get to do what we get to do. And you're a bit of a Wonder Woman yourself, too. So.
I was about to say the same about you. It is a gift to be able to forge these connections with people through stories and through these characters. And I feel super empowered talking to you. So thank you so much.
It was so nice spending this morning with you. So thank you.
I know.
So much.
How do you know your team's strong enough? If you can't bring down the charging bull, then don't wave the red cape at it.